course, just like with description, I went through and I said, look, here's some kind of key things. There are some key things with this, but it is much more about just really thinking deeper on a lot of these things, and that's why it is important. So every essay, I don't care what, is going to have your main point or thesis, evidence to support that, and a discussion or interpretation of the significance. And that's just the so what. Just think of it as the big, and not so what, it's so what? Tell me about it, right? And that's just that big interpretation question. And this is really important because this is key in almost everything. There are very few times in college you will write, just give me the facts, just summarize it. And if somebody wants that, they will tell you, they will summarize it, do not put your opinion in it. And that's where you read a paragraph and you ask yourself, what was the main point here? And you write that down. And then you read the next one and you write that down. And then you turn that into a nice big old summary. Okay? But most of the time, what people are saying is, yeah, go, hey, you've read this. What do you think about it? You're going to use some evidence here in this essay. Your evidence is your description, your story. In your first one, your grammar notes one, I said, what's your favorite place? Tell a story. It was the same thing, right? And then you naturally come to some more of that explaining. In some essays, you're going to have to use research. So go out and find out what other people think about this. But this, don't forget that, because sometimes I used to get really bummed. I would feel like all these teachers want to know is what other people think. Yeah, they want to know that I have read what other people think, but what they really want to know is what do I think about it. So again, remember that writing a paper is an honor to you. It's not just taking a test, you can memorize things, but it's saying, what do you as an individual think? So whether you think it's pain or not, fact is, somebody cares enough to ask you that question. Okay? And then this is really key. You leave this out, then it is just, oh, well, here's my story. Or it is just, here's what other people say. And that's not what we want. So this is really key. The other thing is, real quick, one of the things that many, many teachers, and they, as an English teacher, we hear from all the other fields, and they say, why don't students, or why aren't you teaching students to develop more? Okay? And development comes from a couple of things. One, making sure you've done this, that you've really thought through what's the so what? What's the big deal that, you've read all these statistics or facts or you've told this story. What's the deeper, not just the surface, what's the deeper meaning? I mean, this is where the philosophy is. This is where you really got to do some thinking. Or another thing is sometimes you go through here and you give evidence and you discuss it. Well, you need to develop that paper longer. Give more evidence. Also, another thing we can see, any of that, discuss it. Give more evidence, discuss it. So when you're asked to develop a paper, you're looking at your paper and you're saying, oh my God, this is not going to be long enough. Anybody been there? Yeah, I'm just staring at it going, oh, do it over again, right? Just add more. Give another example. Discuss it. Give another. First, make sure you've done those things. So, main point, your thesis, what's your main point? In an essay like this, you generally don't have one sentence that is, here is my main point. Now, when we get to essay 2 and 3, we will have one sentence that is our thesis. This is the main point. But one like this, it's much more kind of intuitive. Evidence and then your interpretation. So, blah, 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 I said all those things. When you're discussing this, so here are things that you can go through that help you figure out what to say here. You want to think about what role has this or the person it represents played in your life. Or if you're looking at something that represents a certain kind of time in your life. I still have the first cassette tape I ever bought. Okay, I never bought an 8-track. I had them because I inherited my sister's car and it had an 8-track player. Yeah, lots of Joan Jett and yeah, lots of Joan Jett. But first cassette tape I ever bought was John Cougar, not John Cougar Mellencamp, not John Mellencamp, John Cougar's American Fool. And I bought that the summer I turned 13, which is so like you're a teenager, right? All of a sudden, this was your first time being a teenager. And so, I mean, I listened to that all summer, and it was on the radio all summer and everything like that. And so anytime I hear a song from that or anything, I don't have that tape anymore, but I still have the case. Somewhere in my house, I still, even though I don't have the cassette tape, I still have the case. I don't know why, because sentimental shit, right? But every time that comes back to me, it's not so much it's a person that this represents, but it is that time. It is that summer of being 13. Right? And I can just like, even talking about it now, I can almost feel the whole thing. So thinking about what that, and then if I was writing about that, I'd have to say, what did that represent? I mean, it was, and I think in most of our minds, that kind of teenness, right, is something there. But it was also a summer I spent a lot of time with my cousins, and their parents weren't as strict. Like, they would just go to work and whatever, and like they drank sodas and ate donuts for breakfast. That shit didn't happen in my house, right? So I mean, in a way, it was like kind of almost this kind of freedom. They lived right down from the pool, and there was a community pool, and we would go to the pool. We'd watch HBO. Oh my God, they had cable. Dude, HBO, I mean, so it was in a lot of ways these kind of freedoms because of also where I was, right? Because I was with the cousins whose parents were, I mean, they were decent parents. They were good parents. I'm not saying that, but they were just, my parents, yeah, less strict. My parents were much more strict, and they didn't keep donuts, and you can drink Coca-Cola for breakfast. Oh my, no, right? They didn't just, my mom, she was like, yeah, go outside and play and everything, but she wanted to know where we were too. So anyway, I mean, that's kind of an example, that time it takes you back to, of course, what you learned from it. And that's very clear with Anthony's in terms of his, his Pokemon medallion thing, right? I mean, this idea that it represents, that lesson that he got taught when he got beat up, which was, I don't like this, and I don't want this to happen, and that he was able to act on that when he saw it happening to someone else. What you learn from it, what you carry with you that came from the object, time, person, anything like that. I can't give you kind of one question that fits everything, because it depends on, one, your experience and your reaction to it. So here's my example from Amy. And again, I mean, mine's okay. I think it's a little too, I was closer to being out of grad school, so I was still in the, like a really smart Barthes, and I read Derrida and shit like that. Foucault, I could throw those people's names around, right? So I think I'm still in the kind of uppity head. All right, so what does that book mean? There's no small bit of irony that Elmer Gantry is the story of a small-time con man who works his trade by building lies around himself and convincing others the truth of his intentions, only to find out when his con comes apart that he has grown to love those he tricked and he has betrayed his only friends. I spent too many years convincing myself that I needed no one and that I was self-sufficient. However, just as in a moment of deliverance in many great stories, mine came in in the form of an unassuming heroine. Amy was my hero and my salvation. I'm not saying my life would be over without her, or that I would have sank to the depths of despair, but it certainly would not have followed the track it has, and I would be diminished without our friendship and without other friendships that came as a result of the lessons she taught me. Like the book, Amy has inspired me and made me smile and laugh. We have shared adventures together and apart, and we have plodded through the daily journey of life, hoping for the semester to end or the next great thing to come along. We've sometimes grown apart, and now may not as be as close of friends as we once were, but despite that fact, the depth and sincerity of our friendship has been a constant in my adult life, and I don't cross a significant bridge without some thought and word from Amy. And if this wasn't an example, I'd probably go on, right? So, I mean, it's not bad. I'm not terribly ashamed of it. And it does kind of reflect me, right? I mean, my voice, this is what I am. One part of me is English teacher. So yeah, I should, I mean, you can see this isn't quite as laid back as some of the others we've read. Yours should reflect you. Yours shouldn't sound like the English teacher unless you want to be the English teacher, or that's just your voice. One of the ones that that you can look at, and I highly suggest you read it. It's like 9 pages long. It was 12. We cut it down. I was like, Sheridan, you're going off track here, okay? But it is a great, great example. It's Sheridan's a defining of character. And he does kind of have a more formal voice. That's just the way he talks, right? So you want to come, and I mean, we all make decisions about there's the difference between the way we talk and the way we talk on paper. So you have to make decisions about that, but don't force it. That's $40,000 worth of education, like coming out the edges there. And I don't know, I think I'd just write it differently today. This is okay, but So, what I'm really doing for me, that book, when I see that book, I do always think of Amy. And that's what I'm trying to get across. And I would go on a little further in the essay. But I want to make sure that I explain that friendship there. So it's important that you do that explaining or interpreting. Otherwise, you are just playing, I hope you get it. And that's not the job of writing. So here are some questions. What does the story or stories you wrote in your last pre-writing assignment show, not just about the object, but the person who owns it? That could be you, could be somebody else, or the time in your life it represents. How is this person or time important to you? How does that show through the object? What does it reveal about this person, yours, time, or time's character, nature, or significance? How has the object, time, or person changed you in some way? So any of those things and more. Those are just to give you ideas because, again, I didn't take Telepathy 101, slacker that I am, and I can't read your mind about what you're writing about and what you're thinking on it. So that's your job. Discuss why the object you chose is important, and think about. And did anybody do some of this in writing your story anyway? I mean, you probably already got a start on it. So don't dismiss that, and also don't count that as this pre-writing. Okay. Sit down and do some more of this. And it's kind of hard to tell our story without some meaning. And you may end up kind of rewording some of what you have. You may end up restating the same thing you already said. That's fine. It's just thinking through it again. And every time you kind of rewrite it and rethink about it, you're going to go deeper with it. And that is the real kicker, is we don't want to just surface. It was really important. Well, no shit. Okay, we don't want to say that. Yeah, see, we don't want to say that. And this just goes through some of those questions. Work to have at least a couple of paragraphs, right? Just sit down and just write. And if you don't paragraph, and it's more like, a page, whatever. But the point is think about why it's important, why it matters. Make sense? Do I need to say more words? Not many?